Uh, that's it. All right. So that's pretty much about us. So let's begin our discussion today. Ravi, how are you?
I'm good. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm hearing
Okay.
perfectly.
Okay.
Yeah, great. So again, we're very honored to have Ravi, the managing partner at Alchemist, with us today to discuss the enterprise solution opportunity. It's a very specific vertical, the opportunities associated and accelerated by the pandemic. So Ravi, as we all know, that there are many accelerators in the Silicon Valley, and they are all different. Some are focusing on the biohealth, some are focusing on the hardware. So why Alchemist choose the enterprise vertical? What's the initial story?
Well, and I can share slides if you want me to, but I'll
Yeah.
give you
Okay.
is it, you want me, should I give the overview on Alchemist? Do people want that, or should I just talk to it? Whatever would be
Uh,
helpful.
well, if it can tell us a better story, then yeah, feel free to whichever best for you.
I'll tell a story and I'll share slides, and then we can make it interact. I'll do it just for 2 minutes. I'll give the 2-minute intro on Alchemist so you can get the full story about why we got started, and then
Okay.
so you understand the full history. And then I'll answer the there's a bunch of different directions that we can go in, and I can show you
Yeah.
some stuff that's behind the scenes. But so let me see if I can pull up just a quick intro. So you've heard of everybody's heard of Y Combinator, and I'd love to find out who's in the can I find out if you first who's amongst the attendees? So could I ask people just in the comments, can you write if you're a founder, if you're a startup founder, if you're an investor, if you're a mentor or other, and
Hmm.
just give me, I just want to get a sense of who do we have amongst in the crowd. So if anybody who's listening, if you want, just in the chat, just type your role. And if it is other, if you can give me detail, then I can cater to what I'm going to be discussing, to who we have, to the audience, and I'd like to make it relevant for you guys. So just add that detail here, and thank you, Yifu, for inviting us. We are honored to be a partner with JJ Lake, and that is our hub where our startups work out of in Mountain View, and so it's really terrific. It looks like we have it looks like it's a cross section group. So most people here, I'm going to talk a little bit to the investors, a little bit to the founders. So
Yeah.
most people have heard of Y Combinator. I'll give you the full details. So what happened is that Y Combinator, which most people know about Y Combinator, some people know about this, some people don't, but Sequoia was the main LP in YC when YC got started. And the reason that Sequoia Y Combinator relationship solved this very important problem that the VCs had, which was how to deal with seed stage investing. Where if they did seed stage checks, it was creating a problem, because if they didn't follow on the investments, it hurt the startups. And and also competitors to their seed stage checks weren't pitching them because they felt like the investors already had a stake in the space. And so the YC Sequoia relationship stopped that, because people didn't perceive Y Combinator Sequoia, but Sequoia was able to fund Dropbox and Airbnb and all these great companies out of YC. So we got started in 2012 by the VCs. And so originally, our original LPs were DFJ, Coastal Ventures, USVP, Foundation, Mayfield. And our mandate was to build a YC for the enterprise. And the reason why was because the feeling was that if you're building an enterprise startup, it's uniquely different than a consumer startup, because you have two key stakeholders. You have your users, but those are oftentimes different than your buyers or your customers. And that simple difference actually creates profound reverberations in terms of how you build a company, and also even the investors. The investor community was also fairly fragmented. There were investors that were focused on enterprise, and those are focused on consumer, but the enterprise investors were really disenfranchised. And what happened was that I used to work at DFJ. So my background is I was at DFJ in Menlo Park for 5 years. I was the original investor I was the second investor in Twitch, in the precursor to Twitch, which was called Justin TV. That exited for almost $1 billion. And then DFJ became the anchor LP in Alchemist as a response to that. But when I was at DFJ, we were doing these speaker series for founders, and we had these amazing enterprise founders that came to the speaker series, and we were asking them, why are you coming to the speaker series? And they said, because there's no accelerator for us. The 500 startups, Y Combinator, are all focused on building consumer startups, and they really were looking for a space for enterprise. And so that was the light bulb moment. So we started in 2012, and our LPs were, and I'll just share my screen now that I saw this stuff, but our LPs were basically a set of these institutional VCs, and then a bunch of corporates have now joined. And we think we always like to fight for the underdog. And in 2012, the enterprise was the underdog. That was the place that was unsexy. Everybody said, how can you do an enterprise accelerator? That's sort of not a sexy business to be in. It since has shifted back, where enterprise is sexy, but we love going after industrial enterprise heavy industries that need to be disrupted. And that's what we aim to do. And we were rated the top accelerator in 2016, which was the only year that CB Insights did the study in terms of how much money our companies raised. And that's partly, I think, because of our focus. And so we've benefited from that focus, and we've had a bunch of great successes. These numbers are out of date. We've now had 140 companies that have raised over $1 billion. And these are some of the companies that have raised. But that is essentially how we got started. I know that was a long thing. And if anybody wants to plug into Alchemist, either in whatever role, if you want to be invited to our investor events, or if you want to get more detail as a founder prospect, just message me, DM me your email, and I'll follow up with a formal invitation. Or you can always email me at, it's the easiest thing is either Ravi@alchemistaccelerator.com, which might be long, or with my Stanford email, which is ravib@stanford.edu. The other hat that I wear, and so Alchemist today, we've had over 140 companies close institutional rounds. They've raised over $1 billion. Some of our successes are companies like Launch Darkly, which has raised over $120 million from DFJ, Redpoint, and Bessemer, and Rigetti, which has raised over $200 million. And there's a long list. And so we are very proud of having built, we think, the premier enterprise-focused community. And at Stanford, if you guys want to see any of our Stanford stuff, you can go to ecorner.stanford.edu. And we also put all of our material up there too.
Great. So, well, it's been 8 years since Alchemist started and focusing on the enterprise solution. So, can you let our audience know what exactly Alchemist have done to help cultivate and accelerate the enterprise solution? Can you give us a few examples?
Oh, about how it's different to have an enterprise accelerator versus a regular accelerator?
Well, you can share that part as well.
Oh.
And also in terms of the program design and also the resources that you brought in, maybe from those kind of perspective as well.
Yeah, I'll show you stuff too. And I'll show you stuff behind the scenes. So we're very different than other accelerator programs because we were differentiating on quality, not quantity. So we limit the class to 25 companies. And we typically have over 400 to 500 applicants for those 25 spots. Mm-hmm. And the program is a longer program. So it's 6 months instead of 3 months. Most of the other accelerators are 12 weeks, which is just far too short for any enterprise companies. And especially for our international companies, they can sometimes take 9 months to a year. And the other thing to understand is that even after you leave Alchemist, you have lifelong access to the network to set up office hours or get connected into investors. And I'll show you what that network looks like. But every company in Alchemist, we have our structured program, which is we have a weekly events, but more than half of the program is individualized to each company. Each company gets 3 coaches. A coach is just somebody that's dedicated to that company, and they meet with the company typically every other week. Then we supplement the coaches with a very deep mentor network. So I'll show you exactly what this looks like. So we have our own team of engineers and developers. They've built this platform. I don't know if you can see this. This is our platform called the Vault, and you can see there's 20,000 people in this network. So there's over 4,000 mentors, and so they have our founders have lifelong access to set up office hours even after the program is over with the mentors, and we think we're the only entity that has built that out. And then we also have a Rolodex of corporate we have over 4,000 VCs also in the network that people can set meetings up with. So like I'm just pulling up one of the mentors. This is Tim. Tim is the former president of Oracle. He teaches computer science at Stanford, but he's one of our mentors who's great on on business models and IoT. And so if you wanted to meet with Tim, you would go in and you could just book a slot. Tim also teaches at Tsinghua as a courtesy teacher. But like, if you want to meet with Tim, you could book a slot with him. This is at 11 a.m. His next appointment is on Tuesday at 11. If you're in the Bay Area, that's at 11 a.m. But you could also meet with him if you were in China or in Taiwan, or wherever you're at. It'll just be later on in the day. So, I think what's really cool is that we've built this hybrid program that has a physical program, but the network has all been built from day one to be online as well, so that people can also benefit from that. So I think we're just different on the quality. It's the focus. We only do enterprise, so none of our startups are monetizing from consumers, or they're at least partially monetizing from enterprises. And that creates a very different program in terms of how you have to build a company, and then the amount of attention and resources that each company gets.
Well, that's a great network. That's actually very huge. I mean, let me ask this way. So if as a mentor, if they want to join the Alchemist, what's the process like?
Well, you message me right now. So make sure you put your put your email, send me your email in the chat, and you can private message me or just do it to all panelists. Then you'll get a formal invitation to register. So you'll put in your information, and based on your background, you'll be filtered effectively. And then if you have had, so we have basically different tenures of mentors, and we have a whole mentor program. So there's specific events for our mentors, and our active mentors get different statuses. It's almost like a frequent flyer mileage program, where the more involved you are, and our premier mentors, based on service or caliber, if you've had an exit of $100 million or more, you also earn equity in the companies, which is also different than other programs. So we do treat our mentors with respect, and we want to, most of our mentors don't do it for the compensation, and we don't want you to be doing it just to make money or equity, but we do want to recognize their work, and we do want them to be respected for their time. So,
definitely. Yeah. And also on the startup side, you mentioned that for each cohort, there were like 400 and 500s competing for the only 25 spots, right?
Yeah.
And what's the selection process like? So what kind of founders you are looking for?
It's 3 screens to get admitted. There's a written application. We do our own diligence, where we typically are looking for personal connections that will reference the team. And then we have in-person interviews. And usually it's a 3-person committee that's doing the interview. And that's usually a former investor, a former founder, and a domain expert. What we're looking for is technical teams. So the first thing that we look for is technical talent. And so we don't admit non-technical teams. All the teams are technical. They're usually not just technical, they're usually intimidatingly technical. So, we have funded faculty at Stanford, faculty at Berkeley, the heads of technical initiatives at the major Silicon Valley darling companies. We're looking for some evidence of distinction. And then it's also nice if there's a business executioner on the team. So our ideal team is 2 technical people flanking a business executioner, where the biggest advantage you have as a founder is your ability to iterate more quickly than a big company. So we're looking for teams that can do that. And if you have a double threat, a founder that's both technical and a business person, in the early stages, that's a huge competitive advantage. But ideally, very quickly, you'll get to at least a 3-person team, where there's one person who's focusing on sales and fundraising, and the others focusing on product and tech.
That's great. So for those who are interested in learning more about the Alchemist, make sure to write down your email or shoot the email to Ravi directly. So let's talk about the pandemic and also the enterprise opportunities associated with it. So what are the new enterprise opportunities created by the pandemic? And how are they different from the ones that are before the pandemic?
Yes, and I have a whole presentation if you want me to go through it on what we did a whole talk to the founders on dealing with the pandemic, which isn't, it's a different question, but this is more around, and I know the audience is split, but if there's a desire in the audience to hear about how to cope with the troubles of COVID, let me know and I can load that up and talk to that. I will address your question, and then I can also talk about the other thing too. So the first thing is, all founders should know that this is actually the best time to start a company, even though it doesn't feel like that. Okay. Even though this might feel weird, this is actually, people who've been around through bear market cycles or recessionary times will tell you that this is the time when there's a bunch of advantages if you can survive. Okay. Because one is, all of your competition, there's far less competition in these times. So you can start to build things the right way instead of in a reactionary way. And all the big companies right now are cutting core, non-essential cash.
Mhm.
And so they're going to cut their discretionary spend in exploratory businesses. Once the economy recovers and there's a premium placed on growth over profitability, there's a vacuum of innovation and those companies get acquired for huge amounts. So, we started out of the Yammer offices, Alchemist, because Adam Pisoni, who's one of our founding faculty members, the co-founder of Yammer. Yammer got started after the Lehman crisis in 2009, when the whole world was in an awful situation. And then they got acquired 3 years later in 2012 for $1.2 billion. I think it was the shortest unicorn puberty period of that time, of a company to go to $1 billion valuation in just 3 years. They were only doing 50 million in revenue. Not that that's little, but for a $1.2 billion acquisition to get to just 50 million in revenue, it is a fantastic multiple. And the reason why they got that multiple was because at the time, Microsoft had missed the boat on building a Facebook for the enterprise, which is effectively what Yammer was, but a social network for the enterprise. And when the markets corrected and people suddenly were like, we need to optimize for growth, there were very few companies that had actually been thoughtful about building that. So the first thing I want to say is that there are, and I'll answer your question, which is on what are all the hot new opportunities.
Yeah.
Because of COVID. I know that's what we're getting at, and I'll talk about that. But I also want to say that I think the best things to start are not necessarily to chase the trends, but to actually be thoughtful about things that will take 1.5 to 2 years to actually build a viable product that are needed. But especially if you look at, if there's a market, a customer, or that you're interested in, or a certain industry sector, just go set up coffees with the head of product in the area that you're thinking about and ask them, hey, what's the biggest hole on your roadmap in the next 2 years? And just find alignment across those things and start to build that thing out, because people are cutting their budgets. So there's certain items that are going to get cut. And if you want to just be a very scrappy entrepreneur, I would say just go identify that and get enough cash to build that out. And you can do that with a fairly lean team. Instagram got acquired for over $1 billion. They had 12 people. It was 12 people when they were acquired for that amount. And so, if you can build if you can get a core group of, I would say, even 5 phenomenal engineers working on a product that is a whole that is going to take 1.5 to 2 years to build, this is the best time to do that and just get the cash. So that's point one, regardless of the COVID situation. Okay. Mm-hmm. Point two is COVID has put wind in the sails of a few markets. So if you're doing anything and our companies have been seeing 3 to 20x growth in demand due to COVID. And sometimes it's just been incredible how much demand has come in. It's a minority of our company. So it's about 20% to 30% of our company. So for the most part, this is not a nice time in terms of traction. It's hard. And things and budgets and everything is slowing down. But if you are in collaboration, that is a fantastic space. So anything that's dealing with asynchronous or even synchronous remote collaboration, digital health, mm-hmm. Last mile delivery and e-commerce services are growing incredibly quickly. We have a company right now that's about to close a raise that's in that space. And one of the top VCs is going to be leading that round. And then basically anything that's cloud driven that doesn't require on-premise stuff is also seeing a big boost. And so those spaces generically, I think, are getting a lot of interest, and there's a lot of wind in the sails of those companies. There's also a lot of stuff that's not so self-evident. So supply chain innovations. So if you're looking at all the things that people have been talking about that that have always been issues in the supply chain are coming to a head right now, because there's so much sensitivity around supply chain in critical areas that there are budgets that people are going to be spending for software to deal with unsexy verticals in the enterprise space that people have not really been spending too much time with in the past. Mm-hmm. So those are a few, and I'm also happy to answer questions around if people want to make this more interactive, or if people want me to, if people want to talk about surviving, I can also bring up that presentation. We can talk about surviving COVID or whatever would be helpful.
Yeah, let's take a look at that. Do you have a slides to share or?
Yeah, I can pull up slides. Oh, we have some okay, could we share some startups you select and you think that they're very promising? Yes, happy to do. So we have a couple companies. We have So if you guys go to, I'll pull up a couple things. Let me share my screen, and then I'll talk to some companies. If you go to the Alchemist Accelerator site, the first thing is everybody can go and look at our portfolio. If you go to portfolio, all companies, you can search by any specific vertical. So if you're interested in any specific area, you can go in and just look up that area, and we will show you the companies that we have backed that are in that space. And so, of course, you can look up the gig economy and all of that and other things. If it's an investor who's asking me for which companies are interesting, send me your email, and then we'll invite you to the investor only events, because some things I can't publicly disclose right now. And so those are investor only, but it's privileged information. I think that we want to share this talk. So I can't give those specifics, but what I can say is, if you look at our recent class that graduated, there's a lot of fantastic and interesting companies, and it really depends upon if people are looking for things that are related to COVID. bCanvas is a really cool asynchronous collaboration platform that is growing very strongly because of COVID. So it's all remote collaboration, and it's a terrific team. I would also say that if you guys are looking for some crazy companies, Frontier Bio came out of Harvard's John Church, George Church, who's the head of the synthetic biology department at Harvard. And this company is producing artificial human tissues in a lab. So instead of needing to do these clinical trials for a cure on humans, you can test it on synthetically created human organs that they're building in a lab. So it completely changes how the FDA approval process works. They're working already with the Mayo Clinic, and it's some of the top roboticists and tissue engineers from Stanford and MIT and Harvard. And so there's a lot of companies. Spext is very, very cool. This is a company that can index your voice after you've spoken into it, and then you can type in text, and it will seamlessly sound like you're saying it. And they're growing also incredibly quickly because of COVID. There's just the ability to create a lot of fantastic online content. So those are some, and then I would just say, look this up and then message me if you're an investor, and we can get you more catered and more inside information on rounds that are happening.
Is that a video playing button for each of the companies?
Yeah, for each of the companies, you can watch their demos.
Oh, okay.
So each of the companies, you can just go to Alchemist Accelerator. You can go and click on them, and you can watch their demo day videos, and you can also see their decks. So everything is available.
Great.
And you can connect into the companies directly. And then, we do have a fund that just gets to co-invest in the winners out of Alchemist. So if people are interested in that, just message me. And so if you don't want to lead, so the best thing is if you can lead and write a check independently. If you want to just follow, once the deals have gotten a hot investor that's funding them and you want a piece of it, then message me, because then you should be part of that follow-on fund. Don't waste the founder's time. And then we can give you inside information on which are the top funds are leading deals into those rounds and getting into those. But let me pull up this presentation on. This is for the founders and maybe the investors, because this is a weird market if you're an investor. It feels like it's a pandemic, but we had the best performing stock market of all time in the last quarter. And so this notion of how do you think about COVID is also, I think, confounding to investors. But for the founders, and if you just feel free to interrupt me as I'm going through this, because I don't know if we want to go into as much of this detail is going to be too detailed, but this is some of the advice that we've given our own founders. And so if there are founders in the crowd, and they're looking for this guidance, then I'm happy to give it. The issue with the private markets is that they reverberate whatever the public markets are facing. So all the investors know this. There is the private markets, when the public markets go down, the private markets go down by a multiple of that, because there's a premium that you get for the liquidity of the public markets that you don't get in the private markets. And so valuations on the one hand are going down because of the public markets and also because of supply and demand. So right now what's happening is that whenever an investor invests in a startup, if Yifu comes to me and says, Ravi, I just need $2 million, just give me 2 million and you can have 25% of my company. I'll be like, great, Yifu, here's 2 million. I give Yifu 2 million, but I reserve another 4 million on my books, because if things go well, Yifu needs more money. If things go badly, Yifu needs more money. Either way, he needs more money. So you have these reservations. Most VCs now are increasing their reservations for their companies because they're not sure that they can get they're thinking that they need to bail their companies out more. So there's less of a supply of capital, and so it is more difficult to fundraise. At the same time, the markets are doing well, or at least they've done well for the last quarter. So now there's this fear of missing out, where the investors know that if they don't deploy capital, they've been they will that their IRRs will that they'll be missing out on some of their IRRs. And so the investors are still active. We're still seeing investors do deals because of that, but the valuations we see are decreasing by 20% to a third in general, and there are exceptions to that as well. Let me and I'm going to go through this, but there are some questions piling up, so I'll answer the questions because I want to make sure that this is responsive. One person is asking, do you plan to invest in more areas, or will you stay in enterprise solutions? We are looking beyond the enterprise. So if right now Alchemist is just launched in Europe, and we define enterprise very broadly, as long as you have enterprises that are involved as user, as giving you revenue or being partners, you qualify for. So like even Google would qualify for Alchemist, because even though it's in their services for consumers, their revenues from advertisers or corporates, they would qualify. So we have a fairly broad definition. And we are exploring more and more areas as we get more and more LPs that are interested in other areas. So you're encouraged to apply, even if you're not sure if it's strictly enterprise. William Chen's asking, how about the equality issue beyond the policies that most companies recently with this is that have been talked about? Have you seen? Oh, Yifu's. Okay.
It's a quite long question.
Okay. We'll answer that later. Okay.
Yeah.
And then what do you think about AI? AI Sean Burns, who's one of our mentors and who's the founder of Flurry, he has this phrase called AAI, which is artificial intelligence, because he says that so many people say that they're AI that we have to have another term to differentiate real AI from fake AI. And so in some ways right now, AI has become such an overused term that everybody's an AI company. Mm-hmm. Real AI is more than just doing predicate logic on just saying, if this, then that. It's really doing inferences. And I think there's a few verticals where AI is incredibly powerful. And I do think that pandemics are one of those, because you need to have real-time decision-making from big data sets. The key thing with AI in terms of booming in the pandemic is data sets, is getting access to proprietary data. And I do think that that's actually a really great opportunity for entrepreneurs. One, because the government actually has data sets that it's looking to give to entrepreneurs, and they have a public mandate to use those. So if you can get one of those proprietary data sets or a data set from the government, you can build a really terrific business around that. And there are some really terrific technologies that are coming out. There are some, we've seen some spin outs out of SRI and NASA that are really terrific around that front. So I'm still very bullish about AI. I think the pandemic will increase the need for AI. I think the thing that you should focus on, though, is getting the data sets and not necessarily, working on another AI algorithm, because that's where the bottleneck is. Mm-hmm. And then there's a question from Lake on conflict.
Ravi, do you want to save the questions probably to the end?
Okay.
We can quickly go through your deck and then leave minutes to answer the questions.
Okay, I'll try to go through this, and I'll give you a 5-minute version of the deck, and then we'll get to, but I also don't want to orphan out the people that have questions, because I want this to be what you guys are interested in. So the first point here is that know that the best startups, as we talked about, like with Yammer, are started in down markets. And we've talked a little bit about that. That's partly also just because if you look at Moore's Law, if you look at any of the innovation analytics, they're immune to the economy. So, if I show, this is Moore's Law since 1900. If I said, Yifu, where is World War I? Where is World War II? Where is, the Lehman recession? You wouldn't be able to spot it on the map, because the technology continues to innovate. So it's not a question of if there's not going to be technology innovation in the next, 18 months. There will be. The question is just whether or not you want to use it or engage it to build a company, and how.
Mhm.
And that's why many of the best companies have actually started during down markets. And these are some examples. And it's because of everything that I said before. There's so many advantages when you start a company in a down market. Your talent, not the least of which is your talent. It's easier to recruit talent. People are grateful to work for you versus when you're in a hot market, everybody's, jonesing for another job. So there's so many advantages to this. The question is, how long is this going to last? And we're not technically in a bear market. We're in a bull market. The public markets have done very well, but I think it doesn't feel sustainable. And I think many people are worried about that. And so if you want, for planning purposes, we want you to have enough cash to last through the down market. And that's, you can look at the data, but it's between 6 and 33 months. The Spanish flu, I think, was 20 months, which is, in 1918. So you can pick your number. But once you've picked that number, make sure that you can survive for that period of time without needing to depend upon cash from investors or from customers. And so the brutal piece of advice here is to shore up that much cash. And this is a long presentation, but and we'll talk about how to do that. But if you're running out of cash and you're a founder, if you're a U.S. incorporated company, you are personally liable for two things. One is any unpaid taxes or any unpaid vacation time and payroll to your employees. So at least know at the minimum what that number is, because you will have to pay for that personally even if your company is an LLC or a C corp. So make sure that you at least have that covered. That's like basic stakes. But then extend this is from Sequoia, and the basic takeaway here is the people that are surviving it's not about being smart. It's about being able to change and making a decisive decision in that change. So right now, if you need to cut your runway, you want to do that if you haven't done that already, decisively and as quickly as you can, because if you cut your runway if you cut your expenses by half, and right now you have 6 months of cash, you've just extended your life by 6 months. So you can survive for a year. If you do that when you're 1 month out of cash, you've only bought 4 weeks. It's going to be just as painful, if not more, to do it 5 months from now than it is today. So you're not going to avoid the need to do it. You're going to have to do it. And if you're going to have to do it anyways, you might as well do it now. And in my experience, you'll be surprised at how you can survive without roles that you think are critical. So you'll have roles that you think, I don't know how I'm going to survive, and you will, and it'll be okay. And in fact, if you cut the right people, it'll actually be a benefit. Your employees and your other co-founders will actually be grateful that those people aren't there. So cut, that's the first thing. There is a lot of different levers that you can use to cut cash or to extend your runway. I guess the first two are around, one is getting cash in through fundraising, and we can talk about that. And then these others are around minimizing cash. There's this great LinkedIn. I'm linking to the post below. You can copy this. That is also a great, if we don't have time to go through all the detail, that will provide a lot of detail. Let me make you go through maybe. So these are some basic things, but to extend your cash, the first thing is don't pay any of your bills that you don't need to. So extend your payables to the extent that you can. If you have lenders, don't ask to defer any payments on the principal for 3 quarters, and see if you can renegotiate the interest. And for any receivables, I know this might seem like I'm speaking on both sides of my mouth, but you do want to see if you can get your receivables paid up front by perhaps giving a discount, or saying that if you pay for the next 3 months now, we'll give you a 4th month for free. So it's okay to give 20 to 25% discounts for getting paid in advance, annual discounts. So you can prorate that based on the time that you need. Keep a weekly dashboard of cash. Just monitor that so that you know exactly what everything's happening, and then build detailed forecasts out. On fundraising, and we can talk more about this, people are closing rounds over Zoom. So we are seeing deals get done, and I can talk more about that. But if you have started any processes, I would urge you to close those as quickly as you can, just because the markets are good right now, and I don't know how much longer that's going to last. Once the markets tank, so the economy is in a recession, but once the market's not. And so I think that's what's keeping everything sort of afloat. I do worry that the markets will tank. And then when they do, it doesn't matter how good you are. It's just everything's going to be closed. So if you are in the throes of fundraising, or if you have any processes, if you're in that process, just do those and get those done ASAP. And then if you haven't started, I would, this is advice for our personal company, so I don't know if it's that relevant. If you have credit lines, I would draw the cash on them now. The problem with credit lines is that when you need them, you can't use them. So check your covenants, but credit lines can be great for giving, or if you have any receivables that you're securitizing, those are also great. There's a lot of great government grants. So especially with COVID now, and if you're in those areas, they can be huge time sucks. So you want to qualify them out, but if they are within your vertical, you should definitely apply for them. And then these are more complicated questions, but if we have later stage founders, there is a very important discussion about how to navigate this with your board, which I can go into if there's interests. And then there's a lot of things on the cost side on how to renegotiate costs, which I can talk about in a second. But let me just go to because I know we only have 10 minutes and I've got a hard stop. So I'm going to, on the cost side, there's a couple things is lay people off. It's actually a good time to lay anybody off that you've been meaning to, but you haven't. So put people on 3 buckets, either lay them off, put them on leave, or furlough them, and then, or retain them. And typically, there's probably just a third of your employees that are really core that you really need to retain. And the others, think about the categories. Whatever customer lifetime value models you have for acquiring customers is likely wrong. So your revenue monetization opportunity with customers is probably off. So readjust those models if you haven't, and then renegotiate all the different other costs that we've talked about. So I'm going to stop this here and just go to the questions. Is that okay, Yifu?
Yeah, let me ask you 2 questions first, quick questions, then we will answer the audience questions. So let's go back to the enterprise solution part. So, well, as we all realize that COVID definitely creates a lot of opportunities, but in fact, many people are actually concerned that will those opportunities exist after COVID? So would you want to comment on that?
Well, I think there's certain markets that people there's certain markets like real estate and others that are sort of in the throes of whether or not, that are in existential crises around whether or not they're going to fundamentally exist or not. But most of the enterprise stuff that we're dealing with is riding the wave of COVID because it's generally cloud-based solutions that are addressing needs that are still going to exist that are driven through interoperability. I've seen that in real estate. So I have had some founders that are like, we don't even know if companies are going to use office space anymore going forward. And so if we have a real estate driven process that has an existential threat, but even in those areas where there are existential threats, there's usually a new opportunity that is emerging behind the scenes. So as an example with real estate, Google has sort of made this very fundamental decision that most of the employees are not going back to the office. 30%, I think, is what they're targeting. Having said that, they now have this new need where they want to be the #1 company for work from home. And what does that mean to you have and this is a huge, fantastic startup opportunity, is to build the premier platform for enabling employee productivity from home. And if you do your customer discovery around that, you'll find that there's a couple key verticals and a couple key applications that are really needed. And there are great budgets for that. So even if you were in a space where you're somewhat still agile, there's likely a great market that you might not be aware of if you just go talk to your key customers and have some discovery discussions.
Yeah.
But if there's a specific area that you're particularly thinking about, let me know.
I mean, you mentioned real estate as an example. I mean, since we're running a co-working space in Mountain View, so we definitely know how it feels. So, well, I saw very interesting trends that we got asked a lot by founders during the pandemic, asking that they want to go back to work, but they are very concerned with the pandemic. So they're asking us if they can have a conference room for only like once a week or so. and so that their team can have an on-site meeting, but just for one day. For the rest of the time, they're probably gonna stay at home. So that's a kind of a new trend that I'm seeing. We don't know if this kind of trend will exist or last after COVID, but I mean, we will have to prepare for this hybrid future.
Yeah, and I would encourage you to dive into that, because what will happen is that there'll be something unusual that you can't predict necessarily right now that may pop up, that where you'll have a big advantage and nobody else is moving in that space. So this is, again, something where you don't have to be fearful that you have this whole real estate asset base and that's now no longer going to be valuable. It's going to be, it'll just look different. So, even so, I'm at Stanford right now, and Stanford has made the decision in the fall where the students historically it was 2 students per room, because now we can't have all the students come back on campus because of COVID. So what we're doing is we're having 1 student per room, which means that only half the students can come onto campus. So only the freshmen and the seniors are allowed in for the fall quarter. And then for the next quarter, it's going to be a different set of classes. So that way everybody gets their own room. And then all the classes are online. So you come to class, you come to Stanford, you work out of your dorm room, but you take all of your classes remotely. Well, that's created a lot of need and opportunity for different types of solutions that we didn't need before. One is that, but like the online curriculum actually is now outperforming the in-person curriculum. So my class does better online than it did in person. We would have never moved to online if we didn't realize that that was needed. And there are certain things that I think that you're going to really benefit from that the big companies can't. So I think there is actually going to be a movement away from big companies doing large real estate leases and having more of these, using more of these Switzerland-like models where they can be plugging into different communal spaces.
Thanks, Ravi. I will just cut my last questions and start answering the questions from the audience. Previously, Lake was asking, any conflict of interest to have multiple portfolios companies with similar product or technology?
Yeah, our rule on that is that we don't admit the same company in the same space for a class, and then we also don't admit them for within one buffer. So for the next class, we will not admit a competitive company as well. So we create that buffer between companies. We have had companies that do compete. It's not necessarily even something that we've intentionally done. It's just that markets will emerge and evolve, and then you'll have companies that will converge into spaces. And so but by having that one buffer, there's no overlap. So all and there's a Chinese wall. We separate out any of the coaches so that they're not sharing any information between the companies.
And also, we have a question on the channel asking, what are your thoughts on blockchain in enterprise space?
Oh, we're really bullish on blockchain. We think we've just scratched the surface on it. It's we think you have to get the right applications figured out, and you have to decide how you want to time the markets, on which markets that you want to go after in which order, because a lot of it is timing, but the need for blockchain is clear. It's just a question of when things will become self-evident. So some things we love, our supply chain is a great example of where blockchain we think has a huge advantage over other things, especially in the COVID era where you want to track everything in terms of where it's gone from source to end, and make sure that if there is a contamination that you can track down to the individual end product. It's very difficult to do that with existing approaches. A blockchain-based approach would be great. There's issues around the energy intensity of blockchain that need to be addressed as well. But I think that blockchain is terrific within certain markets and certain verticals. And I think this is a good time to do blockchain because all the mercenaries are gone. Like everybody's just trying to do blockchain to make money. They're still there, but there's a lot of missionaries that really care, and that I think the better products are going to be built. And I do think that blockchain also affords you to do novel things with coins, which are better for entrepreneurs in some ways.
Yeah, it's definitely worth exploring. So it seems many people are very interested in, we only have time for the very last question, but it seems people are very interested in applying for the Alchemist, the next batch. So I'll just summarize the questions here. So would you summarize some startup selection criteria, and also what's the ownership requirements by Alchemist?
So we're people driven on our selection criteria. We're looking for great people first. So and that can be measured in a lot of different ways, but we first look at the teams. And we're looking for teams that are doing something that they're uniquely, designed to do or passionate about. And originality is more important than competence, if that makes sense. So like doing something that's unique, we love, especially because that's rare. And then, and so we're looking at the team first, and we're looking at people that are going after markets that we think will warrant the interest of the top venture funds. But we will admit, we've admitted teams where they've started the day of Alchemist. So you don't need any traction to apply to Alchemist. And then we've also admitted teams that are 10 years old and that have raised $5 million in funding. So we're really team driven, and we found that the program is actually very relevant for companies in a wide range of stages because of how flexible it is. Our ownership requirements are flexible. So it's single digit equity percentages. The textbook, the standard offer is 5% of equity, but it's a wide range, and we will negotiate. It is negotiable, the offer, and we will adjust the offer.
What's the top?
7% or 7 or 8%, I think, is the most that we've taken, and I think the bottom is generally around 2%.
Cool.
Yeah. I think we've done less. I think we might have done 1.5%. So I don't want this to be like my word. I think we have had some companies that have had exceptionally low equity. But I think right now the bottom is around 1.5 to 2% and the top is around 8%.
Great. Thank you, Ravi. That's gonna wrap up today's event. And thank you for joining us tonight. And thanks all the audience for joining us. So regarding next week, JJ Lake, we're gonna have a special edition of the program. It's not going to be Meteor Next Invest Online. So instead we are going to have panels. So we're still designing it. Hopefully we will announce the news by early next week. All right, that's it. Thank you again, Ravi, for joining us tonight, and you have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. If you want to get connected, and just send me your email. Otherwise, thank you, Yifu, for having us. It's great to be here. And all of you founders, you guys are heroes. Remember that. And investors, the best thing you can do is write a quick check to those founders. Okay.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.